Hello, WBSE.
What's going on, WBSE?
Bill and Chad Hadmans here. We're going to present a review of premium bourbons to you. This is the first in a series. Today, Pappy 23. And my partner Chad here is going to go over some history with it, and then we're going to give you our review of the nose and the flavor profile. Take it away, Chad.
All right, so way back in 1893, Julian Van Winkle, Pappy, started working for the William LaRue Weller Wholesale Company. He worked there for about 9-10 years, and maybe a little bit longer. I think it was closer to 20 years, Bill. And him and a partner bought William LaRue out, and also acquired the Stetzel Distillery, which now known as Stetzel Weller. Of course, they went out of business in, I believe, 1992. So going back, Van Winkle's doing his stuff. Of course, he's known as Pappy. Right before Prohibition, he released what we know as Old Rip Van Winkle bourbon. It wasn't out very long before Prohibition took place. So, of course, most distillers started producing medicinal whiskey, and it was only a handful of them. I forget the numbers, but it was over 400 distilleries before Prohibition, and then, Christ, they all went out. Most of them went out of business. So, the Old Rip lineup, or Old Rip Van Winkle, wasn't reintroduced until roughly 1972 by Julian Van Winkle, Pappy, his son, Julian Jr. He brought it back into the mix, and it started rolling and everything. So when he had passed away in maybe, I think it was 1981, Julian's Jr.'s son, Julian III, Julian Van Winkle III, took over the Pappy brand. So it's been going on since 2002, and they make six different variants of the Van Winkle lineup, which starts as a 10-year-old, which is the Old Rip Van Winkle, the 12-year-old, which is Van Winkle Family Reserve Lot B, aged 12 years. You have a 13-year-old Family Reserve Rye, which wasn't produced this year, 2017, because it wasn't aged long enough. They only had, I think, 12-year-old barrels versus 13. Then you go to Pappy 15, Pappy 20, and then Pappy 23. Us in the bourbon communities, we call these wheaters. It's primarily, the second ingredient is primarily wheat. Of course, it's made of 51% corn, and the 23-year-old is 95.6 proof this year. I believe it was the same as last year. I'm not sure if it's the same proof every year because I haven't had that many bottles. So, the lineup and the history is pretty neat. You got a lot of famous people that you see talking about it, whether it's on their television show or in a movie. I know one movie was Batman versus Superman. Lex Luthor's house, he has some Pappy on the bar in his glass. Anthony Bourdain from No Reservations, and David Chang, who I believe is a cook, also talk about Pappy a lot. They consider it one of the best bourbons on the market. It's a lot of talk, a lot of hype, a lot of desire to own one of these bottles. They're kind of a trophy bottle for a lot of people. So let's see what it's all about, Bill.
I drink my trophies. I think you missed one in there.
Yeah, what's that?
The Pappy 25, but that's not readily available.
That was a Old Rip Van Winkle 25, and it was 107 or 114 proof. It came out this year or last.
Was it last year? I think so, yeah.
Beautiful decanter. Gorgeous bottle.
Outrageously priced.
Several $1,000s, I believe.
Yeah.
Like $2,000, $3,000 maybe. So we had poured these slightly before we started the video.
Give them a chance to open up.
The color of this is, you could see in the bottle, which I always like showing a bottle. It's a nice deep amber red. Absolutely beautiful color when you hold it up to the light in your glass. Has some nice long legs that just trickle down the side of your glass. And speaking of glasses, I'm drinking from a Canadian Glencairn, and Bill's drinking from the standard Glencairn. I prefer the Canadian style just because it's a little bit bigger in the hand, a little bit more air in there. They definitely nose different.
Absolutely. You get a little better nose out of the regular Glencairn
Definitely.
versus the Canadian.
I think the Canadians work better with higher proof bourbons, personally. But this definitely should be drank out of a standard Glencairn. And on the nose, Bill, what do you get?
Oak forward. Absolutely oak forward. I want to dab it behind my ears. It's got a wonderful smell to it. Vanilla. Some caramel. No, don't dab it behind my ears.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's definitely, as Bill just said, oak forward. 23 years in the oak. This is a fantastic nose. I'll tell you what, I could be in a room with this smell all day long. I could die a happy man from this smell. I mean, it's honestly, it's breathtaking. It's one of the better noses on a bourbon I've been around the last several years, and I've been around a lot of different glasses of bourbon.
So we should put it in a casket with you?
Yes, please. Just put an empty one because I would have drank it. So anyway, cheers, Bill.
Cheers.
The nose is absolutely stellar.
Definitely oak forward.
A little bit more heat for a 95 proof than you expect right up front. You do get a ton of oak. A ton of oak in that.
Caramel, vanilla.
A little bit of apple, maybe. A little
fruit.
bit of cherries. I was just going to say like a dried cherry, maybe slightly chocolate covered cherry. And I definitely get like pipe tobacco. Some sort of tobacco, and it kind of makes me think of pipe tobacco. My uncle used to smoke. Absolutely fantastic.
Got a nice mouthfeel.
The finish is great. It starts from the beginning of your tongue and just slowly goes down your throat. Flavor is just pronounced as it just sits there. And it's very, very dry, which high oak bourbon typically, at least I've experienced, to be somewhat of a dry bourbon.
It's definitely dry.
I totally enjoy that. I mean, you could sit here with a glass of water and have a sip of water afterwards.
I have to pour a little more.
Pour a little bit more. So one thing I like to do, and no, I'm good. I still got quite a bit. One thing I like to do in tasting is add
a little bit of
just a
water.
little bit of water to try to open it up a little bit. Sometimes it helps, sometimes it doesn't. Typically, I do it with more cask strength bourbons. I'll do it occasionally here with the 110 proofs, give or take, but sometimes even on the lower proofs, like this being a 95 proof, I'll add one or two tiny drops.
Which this is, I didn't mention in the beginning, this is the fourth pour I've had of this since I cracked this bottle. And these bottles are meant to be opened, by
Definitely
the way.
meant to be opened.
And each time it has opened up a little bit more. And I've tried it neat and then with a couple drops of water. And by the way, this is well water, it's not city water. And the water softens the nose and the palate on it, but opens up more complexities in the
It definitely
flavor.
brings out more in the nose. It's kind of smooths it out and rounds it a little bit.
Nice long finish. Superb bourbon. Now, as we were talking about before,
I think,
Chad?
not to cut you off, Bill, I'm sorry. I think one or two drops really does great in this. I think it really opens it up to where it's supposed to be at. Bill?
I was going to say the hype on this.
It's a lot of hype. I mean,
It's a good bourbon.
it's
a great
crazy.
bourbon.
I mean, since the Pappy heist in I think 2013, give or take a year. I believe it was 13, maybe 14. A whole bunch was stolen from the distillery.
65 cases.
3 bottle cases of the 20-year and like a handful of cases of the 13-year rye.
Nine.
And there was some other things that were stolen also. But that got on the world news. I don't know if that flamed the popularity or the aforementioned celebrities talking about it boost the popularity of, or the hype, I should say, of the whiskey itself. I mean, I know I've been in the stores and just talking to the salesman or the store manager and hearing somebody come in, just walk up there. Do you have any of that Pappy stuff?
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard that personally several times, and I kind of chuckle because you know their bourbon of choice is Jack Daniels, but they've heard of Pappy Van Winkle, and a lot of people, once again, they treat it as a trophy. You know, it's, oh, I got this.
Years ago, this used to sit on the shelf and collect dust.
Absolutely.
And now you can't get it. Or if you can get it, you're paying premium prices for
For the
it.
most part.
And by the way, I didn't pay premium price for this. I paid just a little bit above retail for it. And even at that, the retail's a little high. There's plenty of excellent bourbons out there in the $100 range and less.
And although I agree with what Bill's getting at there, if I saw it at retail or even slightly above, I personally would buy it. I enjoy it that much. I'd spend, you know, I don't want to say double retail, but I would pay a little bit more than retail. It's $250 for one bottle. You know, you compare it to a scotch of the same age, and you could be paying $1,000 for that bottle.
Mm-hmm.
So when I look at it in that regards, I think it's kind of a fair value. Is the liquid inside the bottle worth $250? That's for you to decide.
Right. Chad and I were talking about this earlier today over lunch, and I get it. 23 years in the barrel, you got to maintain the barrel, you got to maintain the wreck house, you got to have personnel. I get it. It's going to cost more than a 10-year-old or an 8-year-old or a 13-year-old, obviously. But I'm sure the hype has played into the fact that it's retailing for $245, $250. And if you can find it at that, buy it, without a doubt. Buy it.
So in our whiskey group, WBSC, on Facebook, we do a lot of reviews, and the guys that do the most reviews set up a scale, and we use a true 100 scale. Personally, I would have to put the Pappy 23 2017 release at between 91 and 95, giving it a exceptional score. I think it's a great bourbon. For myself, the nose alone sells me on the bottle. I would definitely buy one, hell, just to smell it, as silly as that sounds. So 91 to 95 I'm comfortable at. I think it's fair at $250, suggested retail. I don't think it's worth the hype or the money it fetches on the secondary, by no means.
I don't think it's worth $2,000, but
It's definitely not a $2,000 whiskey.
I give it a solid 95 on that scale. It's a solid bourbon. Again, it's not worth $2,000 for me. It was nice to get it this year. I did have the opportunity to share it with my sons for our on Christmas, and that made it worthwhile.
And right there is what it's all about. Opening a bottle, especially a special bottle, to share with friends or family.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's
what
the
it's all about.
WBSC way, without a doubt. So, Bill,
Cheers,
cheers.
Chad. Cheers, everybody.
WBSC, cheers.